What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of GLE. Phil here, and man, I am excited for today's show. If you haven't already, follow, subscribe, share the show out. We only grow by word of mouth, so please, as you go lead everything, share the show. On today's episode, we have a public speaker and entrepreneur. She is the former executive director of the Columbia Jewish Federation of South Carolina. She's the host and founder of the Ukraine Voices from Within podcast, founder of Juber, which I'm excited to talk a little bit about. And she's now the chief development officer at Ukrainian Patriot. But what I think is so cool about Anna is she just sees needs and she goes and does and takes action and goes for it. And, that's what Go Lead Everything is all about. So I'm really excited for today's conversation and new perspective from Anna Sazonov. Welcome to GLE.
Thank you so much, Phil. And it's such a pleasure to be here because basically how we started conversation was on LinkedIn. So thinking LinkedIn is a platform that does work. And when we just started our conversation a few minutes ago before we hit record, it was so interesting to hear about the perspective of this podcast. And I told Phil, oh my God, it's so different. Like I'm coming from the nonprofit world, you coming from the profit world, but at the bottom line, we both looking and making change and just do. And Nike's slogan, and it's not a commercial, just do it. It's really accurate. Like if you want something, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And from a little bit what you shared about me, yes, it was just do it.
Yeah, 100%. I think so many people, they're waiting around for other people to change. You hear them complain about their circumstances around them, but what they don't see is in order to change their circumstances, all they have to change is themselves and what they're
And
doing, right?
100%. And the first step is super difficult because what if I will fail? What happened if I'm not going to succeed and have the dream that I have in my head? And what's going to happen? But failure is part of the process. I remember the first time that I took a big step and moved from the for-profit to the nonprofit. So I was born in Ukraine, moved to Israel. I grew up in Israel most of my life, and I went to the for-profit world. So I have a degree in business and economics, worked in different industries, worked in startups and stuff like this. And I remember I was sitting in front of two screens and asking myself, what else?
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to happen? This is what I'm going to do for my rest of my life. I feel like I was born to do bigger things and
Mm-hmm.
impact more and to make this world a little bit better. So I just moved to the US. I dropped everything, quit my job, packed 5 boxes, 2 suitcases, and
Wow.
moved and worked for a nonprofit sector. And I
How
worked
old
in
were you at the
college.
time?
I was 29.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. So like in the peak of my life when I
Right.
supposed to like find my mate and what society is expects us to do. I kind
Right.
of like, okay, bye, I'm going. And literally all my friends were already married and getting kids and all of this. And I'm like, no, I'm going to fulfill myself and try something different. So I arrived to the Emory campus in Atlanta, Georgia, and I started working in an organization I call Hillel. So it's kind of like a home away from home for Jewish students on campus.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know anything about college campuses. Like all I had in mind is American Pie, and that's it. Literally, I didn't know.
It's
But
fairly accurate.
yeah. But after like a month working with students, I'm like, I really like this job, and I really like to work for the nonprofit sector and kind
Mm-hmm.
of work with kids and students about their identity and who they are, and like kind of discover. And I decided to stick around and to stay and get my master's in what I'm doing right now. So Jewish leadership and nonprofit management.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, everything started with one decision and kind of taking the first step. And if you will tell me 6 or 7 years ago that I will be, lead a federation, then work for Ukraine sector, I will laugh at your face and say, no, it's never going to happen. Or like even be a public speaker to actually have people pay me money to go and speak for them or like at their events, I would never think it's happened. But everything happened with one step, with one risk in quotes. Um, yeah, so you never know where it's going to lead you.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So born in Ukraine, lived over in Israel, and then moved to Atlanta, Georgia,
And from Atlanta, Boston, or
Boston.
Massachusetts, better to say, yeah.
Okay.
2 years there for my master's, and that was during COVID. So I
Uh,
was in cold Boston during COVID.
But that wasn't very fun.
And that wasn't very fun, not at all. But what made it fun is basically to look for different opportunities to make a change and to make
There
a
you go.
difference. Because I remember when COVID started, we were terrified. We thought the end of the world is happening and we're going to have zombies and apocalypse, and people start to prepare their like getaway rooms and stuff like this and kits. Um, and me and a friend of mine from school, we start to think about the needs that we have right now in the community. And one of the needs was also connection, personal connection, and create a community with this chaos of distance. So we learned that there were many Jewish medical professionals that don't have access to kosher meals for Passover.
Mm.
And it was right before Passover started. So it was the beginning of April. And they don't have access because they're working shifts 24/7 in the hospitals. The hospital is not equipped to give them those meals. So we're talking about like hundreds of people in the Boston region that don't have access. So
Mm-hmm.
we sent a survey to all our contacts and to see exactly what is the need. And within 24 hours, we had like, I don't know, close to 50 requests for
Wow.
meals. And we had zero meals. Zero meals. Passover starts in 24 hours. What do we do? So again, we start to get to our network and start to make some phone calls. And at the morning of Passover, the evening of Passover, I receive a phone call saying, "Hi, Anna, we have this and this donation for you, this amount of meals you can feed people during Passover." So
Wow.
literally everything sorted out. And that day, Juber was born. So Juber is a combo between Jewish and Uber. So our mission was to deliver Jewish experience all the way to your front door.
Yeah.
So until today, Juber feeds low-income seniors, Holocaust survivors, and some medical professionals. Again, medical professionals do not need
Mm-hmm.
those meals anymore. But throughout the time of COVID, when everybody were in a lockdown, didn't know what to do, we engaged different volunteers to drive, and everything was COVID safe. There was no contact, but we put the meals in their cars. They drove to the recipient, put it outside of their door. They got an invitation to be part of the community so they can come and join the services that we had online.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the opportunity to celebrate Shabbat. So Shabbat, Friday evening, we have very celebratory event in Jewish tradition, and they felt part of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, we didn't only rely on donations. We basically encouraged the local community to purchase meals from the caterer that we worked with.
Mm-hmm.
So for every 2 meals that they purchased, the caterer gave us a meal. So it was a win-win-win situation for everybody because the caterers were suffering because it was before the PPP. So they didn't have a source of income. They were failing financially. And basically we brought them more revenue and source of income and more orders.
That is awesome.
That was a very interesting ride, and to do all of this during my dual master degree. So that was the best experience to kind of like to walk the talk, I guess.
Yeah. I find it was my senior semester at university. I was an engineer in baseball, in season for baseball. And I had to take more than a full course load while taking senior design to graduate. And oddly enough, that was my best GPA semester because I couldn't stop working. I was just working like the whole semester. But I think there's something to that. Like I almost challenge anybody in their 20s to see how much they can really take on, like push that limit to see what they're really capable of. I feel like a lot of people, spend their early days partying and just kind of wasting time, but it's really a good time to kind of challenge yourself and kind of see what you're made of. Don't you think?
Yes, 100%. It's also like the best environment to make mistakes.
Right.
There is not a lot of consequences. You
100%.
don't have a mortgage, you don't have kids, you don't have a lot of responsibilities. Like if you
Right.
make mistakes, that's fine. Everything is fixable. And also you're part of an environment that's it's like fertilizing. You have professors around you, you have network around you, you have mentors around you that just there to help you to succeed and make a difference. So I think during college time and master time, like master degree time, this is the time to try new things and to establish new things. And don't be afraid of the failure. Because I think one of the key things here, people to only think about the word failure kind of paralyze us. And I'm not saying to, start something and not, on purpose to fail. I'm
Right.
saying do the best that you can. And if you fail, that's okay. Don't be afraid of it.
Right.
Embrace it. Learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're afraid of it, you're not going to do anything.
Right.
You're not going to move.
100%. That's really good advice. So, Anna, tell me more about your Jewish upbringing in Ukraine. I've actually heard that Ukraine has a lot of Nazis, like to this day. Is that like totally crazy or what? Like, tell me more about your upbringing over there and your Jewish childhood.
Okay. I will split your question into few levels. So my personal level. So I was born in Ukraine, and basically, as you can see, my last name is Sazonov, but
Yeah.
by blood, I'm Lieberman. So
Ah,
basically, my great grandmother remarried to a non-Jewish fella in order to survive. And after she, had my grandfather is Jewish from both sides. She got divorced, and then she remarried to a Ukrainian fella. And because he was very involved with the government and was part of the Red Army, he knew that something bad is going to happen to the Jews. And just it was before the Second World War started.
wow.
And there was a lot of influence from Germany and kind of like, a lot of hate going on and the beginning of the Holocaust. So
Wow.
basically, he changed the identification of the family. So back in the days during the Soviet Union era, the Soviet Union saw Judaism as a nationality. So they put the nationality on their passports or identification.
Mm,
So imagine this: it says that you're Jewish, and there is a lot of hate like towards you. So it's immediately kind of like, I cannot succeed, I cannot do anything. So basically, you cannot go to higher positions in the government or
right.
run businesses or to go and study some of the things at a university. So there is not a lot of accessibility to the world. So he changed the identification of the family. So basically, we all were Sazonov. And
Okay.
back in the days during World War II and the Holocaust, many Jews died. Like, for example, the town that I'm coming from, 95% of the Jewish population was killed by the
Wow.
Nazis and their helpers. Yes. So, and post World War II and the Holocaust, there is still some hate, like all over the world.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't know that I'm Jewish. I didn't know that we have anything Jewish in us. And
Really?
then nothing. Like I was Ukrainian girl. I was, part of the Soviet Union.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Also to live in the Soviet Union, it's kind of not fun because freedom is very limited. Like you
Mm,
cannot share things or you cannot say certain things, and you always have to be like very grateful for the government and communism and
mm,
Stalin and like very very much into this whole brainwashing machine, and you cannot have
interesting.
connection with the outside world,
Wow.
and you cannot leave the Soviet Union like borders. So basically, imagine a situation that you have some hate towards you, but you cannot leave the country. You
Right.
cannot just immigrate to a better country.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Only after few major events that happened. So one of them, it was the influence of Chernobyl. So I
Hmm.
grew up 90 miles from Chernobyl, and the joke is that's the reason that I'm glowing. Um,
It's
and
good.
so yes, so Chernobyl, and imagine a situation, and I don't know if you have kids or not, but
Yeah. I have a two
everything
year
that
old.
everything that your 2 year old is touching or eating, you have to make sure that it's without radiation.
Wow.
So basically, my dad got us a radiation detector in the black market, and we had to check everything.
Wow.
And then you start to see kids that getting super sick, and you start questioning yourself, why do they get sick? And if you talk about that it's a influence of the radiation,
Right.
the government is going to shut you down and say that it's not exist. So they said that everything is perfect, there is no
Wow.
contamination, everything is great,
Hmm.
butterflies and unicorns. And then the second thing that happened, Soviet Union collapsed in 91, and basically the borders are open and everybody can do whatever they want, and that's brought a huge deficit to the country.
Hmm.
And what you grow is what you eat, and there is,
Mm,
the economy is horrible. And again, imagine that you don't have anything to feed your 2 year old.
hmm.
So my mom heard a commercial by a Jewish organization called the Jewish Agency for Israel that welcomes all the Jews to the land of milk and honey. So she goes to my dad and my grandfather and say, okay, they hate you for a reason, right? You have
Mhm.
something Jewish in you. Let's move to Israel.
Mm.
So then, yeah, then they met with the representatives of the Jewish Agency. And like a year later, we moved to Israel. And only in Israel, I felt, and my family felt like they have the ability to be free Jews and to be who they are and fulfill their identity. But for the second part of the question, that there is a lot of Nazis still in Ukraine. So I'm not going to lie. Yes, there is anti-Semitism in Ukraine, like every other country in the world, including the US. There is
Oh,
a
sure. Yeah.
very, very, very scary percentage and like studies that's happening right now in the US that there is high percentage of anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic events that's happening here. Like, for example, in the Southeast region from 2019 to 2022, there was an increase of 140% of anti-Semitic events in this region.
Hmm.
Yes. So anti-Semitism still exists all around the world, unfortunately. Yeah.
Sure.
But
Sure. Yeah. So that's an amazing story. So you it sounds like, what was your upbringing like before the Judaism sort of routine, or were you raised Christian? Were you raised in faith at all? I'm just kind of curious, like your family upbringing and background. Thinking, trying to compare, right? I'm from like farmland USA, the Bible Belt of the US, right? And so I'm thinking of being in an environment where you can't say or do certain things, and you got this oppressive government, and you're constantly feeling this oppression from the whole world around you, right? Like, I just can't imagine being in that environment, so I'm asking questions just to try to understand that a little better.
sure. During the Soviet Union, there's no religion. They
Oh.
saw religion as opium for the many. That's how they refer to religion. So there is no church, there is no mosque, there is no synagogue. Everything was converted to something different and social. So
Mhm.
there is no room for religious identity back in the
Wow.
days. So, but my mom's side comes from more like Orthodox, Russian Orthodox leaning, or like Ukrainian Orthodox leaning religion, but it's not
Sure.
something that we grew up with in Ukraine, or at least I didn't grow up with. And there
Yeah.
were more like national holidays that we celebrated. Like, for example, you guys have Christmas, we had Novi God. Novi God, it's the new year. So we had a tree, but we celebrate the new year.
Okay.
So it's not on a religious aspect.
Right. Very interesting. So strange. That had to
It
be
is.
just totally strange.
It's like a different, again, it's different.
What's so
I
fascinating
don't
to
want to
me
say
about it
evil.
is like, we always grow up hearing stories of the USSR and the Cold War and all this stuff, but like over here in the US, like they don't teach us anything about Russia. Like, you literally don't learn anything about it. It's always been bizarre to me. It's like this weird unknown. Same with kind of Africa. Like, African history is very just non-existent over here in the US. And Africa's like the largest continent of all the continents. And like Ukraine, vast resources, like really a tremendous country with all sorts of natural resources. There's huge pharmaceutical development over in Ukraine. I think I've heard there's like crazy underground tunnels and stuff over in Ukraine. Like, is that all crazy talk? Like the whole Chernobyl, Chernobyl's obviously over there too, which has
Yeah.
a pretty tremendous history. But tell
I
tell me
I
a little bit
I
more
do
about
agree.
Ukraine.
Yeah. So before I talk about Ukraine, I do agree that sometimes when you live in the US, you kind of like in your own bubble.
Yeah,
And a lot of Americans see America as the center of the world.
no,
And
you don't say.
yeah, just like I flash news, you're not. There is more countries here. Yes. Other countries that do not speak English and
Yeah,
go with centimeters and Celsius and not Fahrenheit.
yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
so I think yes, Ukraine has a fabulous, amazing, fascinating history. And it's been there before Russia is even exists.
Hmm.
So Ukraine was there for many centuries, and Ukraine was there also fighting for freedom for a long time. So I think this is not a new war for us. We've always been fighting for our freedom, but this
Right.
is a war that happened in the new world. In 2023, we actually have, tanks and jets and missiles and everything to do with the war. And I can't believe that it's happening in 2023. Like I thought the last big war that we fought was World War II. So that's kind of fascinating me. And Ukraine has a lot to offer to the world, and it's already been offering to the world. So Ukraine it's the breadbasket of Europe and the Middle East and some countries in Africa. So we feed over 400 million people around the world. So the consequences of the war, it's not only between Russia and Ukraine. The consequences are global and they're huge. And we see it also here in the US. Whenever you go to buy your groceries, you see that the prices are going up. Whenever you go and fill your gas, you see that the price is going up. And it's all because of this war. So yes, it's happened on the other side of the world, but it still has a huge consequence on us here.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting perspective. I know obviously Vladimir Zelensky, president of Ukraine, has gotten a lot of positive press over here in the US and maybe around the world. We were just chatting before the show just about how, it's interesting how he was an actor comedian, and I was commenting on just my skepticism of even some of the great US heroes like Ronald Reagan, who was a Hollywood actor, part of the Bohemian Grove. And I don't know, I just question some of these mainstream narratives that these guys are just all they're cracked up to be, and these heroes. And it's just so ironic that Zelensky had a TV show where he was the president of Ukraine and then he became the president. It's like, it seems like some weird CIA programming sort of deal. But, talk a little bit about politics in Ukraine. What kind of, we've touched on the war and how it impacts the world. And obviously, like, US is getting involved and throwing tons of money over there, right? And like, to me, that's I don't want to be involved in other countries' wars in general, right? So like, you think of all the Afghanistan's, Iraq's, Desert Storm, Vietnam, all these times where, we get involved all around the world, spend a ton of money, people die. Obviously, American citizens are, going around fighting and dying for who knows what, right? What's the real reason behind it? So give me your perspective on, additional politics maybe behind the war.
Yeah. So I will start by saying that the war that we have right now, it's not only a war about Ukraine. Putin and his government said multiple times that this is a collective war against the West. So it's not only against Ukraine. Ukraine is as a representative of the West. So it's a war against the West and against NATO. So right now, Ukraine is fighting the fight because there is no troops, American troops or NATO troops on the ground. There is only a financial and equipment support that we're receiving. And thank God we're receiving that, because without that, we could not, tolerate or win or push back on Russia. Again, before the war started, we thought that we're fighting the number 2 military in the world,
right,
against a country. Ukraine doesn't have a military background. It's not Israel that we always been into, fighting, and we have a very strong military. Ukraine started to develop their military to the extent that we see right now in 2014. So 2014, basically, the war that we see right now started. So Russia took over Donbass and Donetsk area and Crimea, and nobody saw it. And he just took those parts of Ukraine, and the world didn't do anything. And then we have more severe war happen in started February 24th, 2022. And actually we see troops getting into the country, trying to take over Kiev and everything. And Ukraine, with not a lot of equipment, pushing back. And the people of Ukraine are pushing back. And the president, Zelensky, said to Biden, I don't need a ride. I need ammo. I need more ammunition to fight this fight. And I think that's why Zelensky is so appreciated right now in Ukraine and around the world, because he stayed with his people. And he said, I'm here. I'm here right now with my people in Ukraine, and I'm not going anywhere. And we're going to fight this fight, and we're going to win this war. Ukraine is fighting for their own existence. But again, on top of that, they're fighting for democracy existence and freedom existence. Because let's take like a very crazy scenario, like if Russia is going to take over or win, whatever victory is going to look like. Because I don't think in a war that there is so many people are dying and cities are being, banished from the world. I don't think there is any victory. But basically, it's a threat to the entire world because now it becomes closer and closer to the West, and you have the nuclear power, basically. You have a problem of Ukrainian refugees all around the world. So people are going to, run from Ukraine out. Basically, Russia is taking over all the natural resources that Ukraine has. And basically, it takes the world kind of like a hostage. So imagine that Ukraine right now feeds 400 million people. So Russia is going to take over it, and those people are going to be hostage. And whenever people are starving or don't have food, that's when revolutions are started. That's when chaos begins. So, and on top of that, that's going to signal to other countries around the world that it's legit to take over other countries because there is no consequences for it. So China is going to take Taiwan. I don't know what chaos is going to happen in the Middle East and what's next. So I think there is a mutual responsibility for the Western world to make sure that Ukraine will be on the victorious side of this conflict or of this war, because the consequences of that are so big on our personal freedom. And yes, I'm concerned with the upcoming elections and some of our politicians sharing. I believe that both parties are politicalizing Ukraine, but the bottom line, I'm thinking about my family. I'm thinking about my heritage. I'm thinking about my history. And whenever you're going to hear something about Ukraine, just remember me. Just remember me and my family that are still in Ukraine. So it becomes more personal.
Yeah. It's easy to, like, when we talk about kind of the high level sort of opinions on the issue. But, the reality is, of course, there's people, real people like you and your family over in Ukraine that are being killed, impacted, right? Like, and like you said, there's millions and millions more relying on resources from Ukraine that are going to be impacted, well beyond this too. So, super important. I thinking back on your comment just about how, it's a conflict with the West. I don't think that I disagree with that at all. And I'm almost wondering, like, does it go beyond just the surface level conflict with the West? And for example, I've heard that the Pentagon actually funded bioweapons labs in Ukraine, right? So, like, I just feel like the West may be doing more. Like, by the West, I just mean the U.S. government or whoever, whoever you want to say that is. I just feel like there's more going on in Ukraine than meets the eye. Am I way off with any of that?
100%. And it's not only in Ukraine, it's all over the world. I think we're not seeing the entire picture, and there is a lot of things that cannot be shared to the public. And by the way, the bio labs it was a whole fake news. They discovered it and got to the source of the person that started those rumors. So it's not true.
The bioweapons labs aren't over there?
No. It's all all was Russian propaganda. And I think also this is also another big problem. We have it's a very well operated machine, Russian propaganda. And you have people in Russia that literally brainwashed, and they're going to be brainwashed for years about what's happening in Ukraine. And they actually believe, and I have family in Russia as well, they believe that Russia is fighting NATO on Ukrainian soil. So this is what people believe, and they justify this war, and they think that Russia needs to continue. And many people on the Russian side are dying in this very unnecessary war. So I just want to share it out there to everybody that's listening. Please be very, very careful what news you're consuming regarding this war, and what who is your source, and if he's reliable or not. And for your questions, yes, I think there is forces and deals and things that are happening that we do not see.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to kind of like look at the values of our country and the values that we want to choose to be part of. And I think right now Ukraine is fighting for the values of freedom and democracy. And
Mm-hmm.
those are the values that leading the US and the West.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to stand with a country that does fight for those values.
I really, one of the key lessons and values of GLE is just questioning everything. And I really like what you said there of just, not taking things at face value and, realizing there is more to it. And, I think what you said about just media in general and propaganda coming out of Russia, obviously, the media machine over here in the US is quite the propaganda machine, as well as it's programmed us for many years and gotten used the good-hearted American people's patriotism, right, to get behind all sorts of unjust and money hungry wars all over the world that destroyed nations and did all sorts of terrible things. So I think it's just super important to just remember that you got to look at people's fruits, right? You said their values, and I think this is so, this goes back to like Christian teaching, but by their fruits you shall know them. And so if you got a propaganda machine that shows you one thing when they're really doing another, that it's hard to tell what their fruits really are. They're kind of the sheep in or wolf in sheep's clothing, right? So we got to just keep asking questions and seek out the truth, right? And we'll find it.
100%. And I shared with you before that on my last trip to Ukraine that I found myself in the front lines, 3 kilometers from the Russians, wearing bulletproof vests, helmets in the car, providing humanitarian aid to a village that was liberated 24 hours before we arrived there.
Wow.
So the footages that everybody see on the TV, they're legit, they're real, they're there. I met people that were disconnected from electricity, water, the world. They didn't know that Ukraine still exists, and that was for 7 months. I was there back in October.
Wow.
So the war is real, is real, and it's happening right now, and people are suffering. People are still disconnected, and think after having this kind of like existential moment in the front lines, that's how I call it. Like literally, we had missiles flying above our heads. We had one moment that the security team said, okay, everybody helmets on because we're being targeted, and just choose the spot that you're going to jump to if we're going to get hit. And that was an insane moment for me. What was more insane than that the group that I was with, it was 11 volunteers total. There were not Ukrainians. They had zero connection or relation to Ukraine. People from the US, UK, Australia, everywhere. I was the only Ukrainian person there. I was translating from Ukraine to English and vice versa, and helping my people. And those people chose to drop everything that they have in their life and just relocate themselves temporarily to Ukraine. Then I asked one of them, a volunteer from Hawaii. He literally came from paradise to hell to help. I asked him why. Why are you there? Why you chose this battle that is not yours? And then he shared something with me. He said, after World War II, many people felt that they didn't do enough. I didn't want to have this feeling. And that sentence, that phrase, resigned with me very much so. I came back to the US, and it was such a surreal moment. I was invited to be a guest speaker in a financial group gathering, whatever, in Orlando, and I'm sitting in a beautiful resort, sipping my Chardonnay, and there is missiles that flying above Ukraine and hitting Kiev and all the places that I visit a week before that. And I was sitting there and I thought to myself, what am I doing? There is such a huge war happening right now. So many people are dying. A war in my values that I believe in, freedom and democracy. I should do something. And a few weeks later, I resigned from my job as the executive director and joined the efforts towards Ukraine. You join Ukraine Patriot to help as much as I can to to what's happening right now, because I don't want to have this feeling that I didn't do enough, or
Right.
there is additional thing that I can do. And I think this is a question that we all have to ask ourselves.
Hmm.
As far as I know, we are you only live once, and sometimes we kind of forget about this,
Hmm.
and we need to remember, like, what do we want to do and what we want to leave behind us in this world, and how we
Right.
can make it a better place. So, but the method that I'm going with when I'm thinking to myself, if I'm going to be 80 years old and I'm going to look back on my life, am I going to be satisfied with what I see?
Right.
If I'm not satisfied, so this is the time to change something in my life. So as
Right.
of now, I think I will be satisfied.
Man, it's just really admirable, Anna. Like, I'm just impressed with you how willing you were to just drop everything, turn your life upside down and go do what you believed in, right? And truly you're proof that if you're listening out there and you don't think you can have an impact right where you are. You can make a change and a big difference in the world. And don't let the lies and criticisms and whoever is telling you can't, don't let those lies get into your ears and into your heart, because that's all they are. They're just lies. God made you for a purpose, and if you have a purpose on your heart, it's there for a reason. He put it there because he made you to go get it. And so I'm just super impressed with that, Anna.
I appreciate that. And again, just do it.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
You're glowing over there.
Yes.
It must be
I
Chernobyl.
wonder. I wonder why. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's so funny. Um, so a couple more questions. Let's talk business. You
Mm-hmm.
founded a couple nonprofits. I think at least worked for some and founded some. What have you learned most about your time in business? What's maybe one of the biggest takeaways you have from your business experience?
It's all about relationships. It's all about relationships with the people that believe in you and your product. And your product could be the nonprofit and the mission and the vision that you have, or it can be the physical product that you're selling. And it's also the relationship that you have with your team, because you're there for one another. I'm a big believer in a teamwork, and we're there for each other. And I always, as a director, I always told my team, I prefer to know about the problems before they become a problem. So just be comfortable to share with me what's happening so we can try to fix it together. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't care what's like, we're just there. We need to solve it before it becomes a problem. Because
Right.
sometimes I feel like there is a fear of trust. Like, should I tell my director what is happening? What's not happening? But like, I
Right.
effed it up and I don't know what's going to happen, blah, 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 blah. It's better to say it before and create a trust
Right.
environment in the team so we
Mm-hmm.
can solve it before it becomes a problem. So yes, relationships with whoever you work with your board, with the people that you believe in. That's the big thing that I learned.
Yeah, that's great advice. I was just talking about that with some folks this week about just teaching people how to communicate with you and when, right? Like you were just saying how, tell me before it becomes a problem so we can solve it, right? And if it is a problem, right, like don't be afraid to tell me, like I need to know. So I see many leaders, they how they react to problems that are brought to them, it can create the total opposite behavior that they actually would want, right? It makes people afraid to come tell them. It's kind of like being a dad or a mom, right? It's like you have your parent who's like, hey, you can tell me anything, but like when you go tell them stuff, like
Can
they
you?
react horribly. It's like, well, why would I tell you anything, right? Because you're just going to act like that. So any advice for leaders or people on just how to communicate better with creating that sort of trusting environment?
To first of all understand that we different people and we work very differently. So, and it's something that I learned in the hard way, because I thought like, oh, everybody should work like me. No, we all work in a very different way.
Right.
And that's the beauty to have a team that we all very different, because we complete each other and we can create like a whole 100% of our operation. And again, I'm sharing right now that it's very easy. No, it's very difficult. It takes time. It takes time to learn this, and it takes conversations and kind of like to do different inventories and to talk about them. Like, and one of the things that I do in the first meetings that I have with teams is like what is the best way you work, and kind of come from their perspective, not my perspective, what I expect from them to do and how I want them to do. They have their own way to produce work. So I asked them, what is the best way you work and what can I do to help you be at your best? And I'm there for them, because if they're going to do their work, everybody are going to be happy, and I'm there to support them.
I love that.
Very straightforward communication.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Like, how, if you're listening out there, how often have you actually asked your people, you know, what are they best at? What do they like to do? How do they like to be communicated with? Yes. Right? Like one of the things I see is, you know, most leaders they force people to communicate a certain way, or they force their communication style onto their whole organization, which, you know, it basically just creates constant pain points for people who like to communicate differently. Right.
Yeah. And I think that brings us to the point that I think the leaders need to be the adapters, not the employees need to be the adapters. Like, we need to adopt different style of work and stuff like this. We need to nourish the people that we work with to their best.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. And like you said before, talking just about nonprofit business, right? It's still a business, even if it's not for profit. So, you know, the business still has to run. And, you know, I think sometimes, you know, folks who get frustrated with maybe their leaders' communication, you know, they maybe don't understand all the you know, potential pressures that some of their leaders might be dealing with. So totally understand that. But I think that's great advice, Anna, for people that, you know, just ask your people. Ask your people.
On that, one of the lessons that I learned as a young female and foreigner executive in a Southern community.
There you go.
In South Carolina. So
yeah, Jewish, Ukrainian, like, come on.
Yes. To kind of like understand followers and leaders, to kind of understand how am I working as a leader, how am I working or like functioning as a follower, and kind of to first of all assess ourselves and then assess what we want from our other leaders and followers. And sometimes there is a big similarity as how we as leaders act as followers into what our team is doing, if that makes sense. Like sometimes think about it, like, how am I want to be as a follower? Because we're followers as well. Like, for example, I was a follower and a leader to my board. Right. I was a leader and a follower to my team. So kind of assess that also when we at our work and when we work with teams. That's
a profound comment, and it's bringing all sorts of things to mind. Like, you know, one of the definitions I love of leadership is just example, you know, being an example. And I've always heard, you know, you can't be a good leader unless you're first a good follower. And, you know, I just think what you're describing to me, it almost sounded like, you know, your team underneath you as a leader, right? Like, they're going to see an example of you being a follower, right? So if you're exhibiting certain things as a follower, they're going to just show up in your organization, like you just talked about. I think that's a very profound observation you made.
Yes. It's very interesting also analysis to do with yourself, to sit down and like think to yourself, how am I acting as a follower? I can be sometimes very obnoxious, but that's fine. That's what I ask for my team as well to do.
Yeah, 100%. Well,
as you said before that, ask the big questions, push back. This is what I expect from my followers to do.
Right. Yeah.
Don't assume that I know all the answers to everything. I don't. But together we do.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Y'all, if you're not following Anna, go give her a follow. Anna, where's the best place for folks to find you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn. That's where let's give a shout out to this platform.
LinkedIn's a great platform. I feel like it's way underutilized by many. I have a blast networking with people on LinkedIn.
And that's how you reach out to me. So that was great. So yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. So just type my name, Anna Sazonov. You can find me on Instagram, social media, Facebook, all of that. And please follow also Ukrainian Patriots. We do amazing work on the ground. What's beautiful about this organization that we don't have overhead expenses. So every dollar that we raise in all around the world goes directly to Ukraine and the people of Ukraine. So we rely on local and international volunteers, and that's why we know the need on the ground. And we're there for the long run.
Awesome. To that point, if you are donating, make sure that, you know, the organizations you're donating to, it's so common to hear these horror stories of these big foundations that do all sorts of crazy things with money, right? And so, you know, knowing where your money's going is so important. So kudos to you for taking initiative to make sure you're doing things right on the ground, Anna. And, you know, people that want to donate to organizations like yours and others, just do your research and make sure you know who you're investing with. And
like for example, I'll give one example that like to see
okay, yeah.
how easy it is. Like in $40 American dollars, you can feed a family of 4 for a week.
Wow.
$40.
Right.
That's how like we get the money directly to what it needs.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So next time you go to a restaurant or a breakfast something like this or Starbucks, think about the $40 that you spend and how much people you can feed.
100%. 100%. It's amazing how far a US dollar goes in some parts of the world. It's pretty wild. No, it's getting worse by the day though. So we'll see how it goes with more of these banks going. Anna, this has been super fun. I got to ask you before we go, one question that I love asking all my guests, and I know you're going to have an awesome answer, not to put any pressure on you, but, you know, who knows who's going to see this show years from now, and who knows, maybe 80 years from now, or however long it's been since World War II, you know, people will be looking up history about the war in Ukraine, and they'll find their great grandma Anna Sazonov and, you know, great uncle Phil having a chat about Ukraine on the GLE podcast, right? And, you know, who knows how many generations could be impacted from some wisdom you brought today. So with that in mind, again, no pressure, what is one thing that you would want to leave with the future generations today?
No pressure.
Take your time. I know it's a humdinger of a question.
Yeah, ask questions. Don't take everything for granted. Put doubts on things. That's the kind of like the big lesson that I learned in the past couple of years. Ask yourself questions as well: who you are, who you really are, and what you really want. And sometimes we are doing things due to social pressure and norms, and we're not necessarily want to do those things, and we pushed into those social boxes, and we were brought to this world to do bigger things, but we're being pushed by other forces. So ask yourself the big questions: what do you want, who you are, be true to yourself. Amazing advice. Anna Sazonov, thank you so much for joining me today on GLE. This has been a blast. Thank you. I appreciate inviting me. All right, y'all. If you're listening out there, go follow Anna Sazonov, SAZONOV, ANASAZONOV on LinkedIn. You can get to all our other platforms from there. Go follow, subscribe to the Ukraine Voices from Within podcast, and make sure you check out Ukrainian Patriots. Anna, thanks again. As you go, lead everything, share the show, and y'all have a great day.